First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade. See ya. And if you have a Bible, go to Mark chapter 15. Mark chapter 15. And if you don't have a Bible with you, or you don't know where your Bible is, there should be a Bible underneath the seat in front of you. That is our gift to you. Just take that. And if you are using one of those Bibles, it's on page 852. So we began this study through the book of Mark. I was looking back through my files, and in February of 2019, we started going through Mark, and God willing, we will be wrapping up Mark this month. Right before we head into the Advent season. So we're picking up with chapter 15 today, but let me just catch us up, because it's been a while since we've been here. We've been in Mark. We took a kind of a break as we were doing out on Church on the Lawn, and so we're kind of jumping back in after some time off, and it's the week of Passover where we're kind of dropping in here. It's the week of Passover. It's the time where many Jews, thousands upon thousands of Jews will make their way to Jerusalem to celebrate and remember what God had done to release them, or to free them from slavery in Egypt. It's a time for feast. It's a time for sacrifice. Jesus had entered Jerusalem on Sunday of this week with his disciples, and now it's Thursday, and Jesus has just shared the Passover meal with his disciples. And following that meal, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John. They go into a garden called Gethsemane, and he starts to pray, and he says, "Hey, won't you guys pray with me? I know what's coming, so just pray with me." And so you remember 3 times he comes back and forth, and he's like, "Hey, can you wake up and pray with me?" And then finally Jesus says to his disciples, he wakes them up, and he says, "Look, my accusers are coming. They're coming to take me away." And so sure enough, here's Judas. He's leading the pack. There's a group of religious leaders. There's a crowd with them. There's a crowd of authority, of soldiers that are coming, and they arrest Jesus and take him away. The disciples at that moment all run away as they take Jesus to the palace of the high priest, and they bring in these so-called witnesses to put Jesus on trial before the Sanhedrin, this group of religious leaders. And the crazy thing is, they bring all these people in to bear witness against Jesus, but they can't find any 2 people to match to corroborate their stories. They can't find anybody to agree with one another of what the problem is here to accuse Jesus. And so they're going, "Look, we don't know exactly how to accuse him, but all we know is we want him dead. We want him out." And so from there, in that moment, chaos ensues as they begin to make a mockery of Jesus, playing games with Jesus, covering his head, hitting him in the face, saying, "Well, tell me, if you are who you say you are, then who hit you?" And spitting him upon him, spitting on his face, and just making a mockery of Jesus in that moment. And that's where we pick it up in chapter 15. In verse 1, it says, "And as soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council, and they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate." So the religious leaders, they bring Jesus to Pilate. Pilate was not a Jew. He was the governor appointed by Rome to represent Roman rule in Judea. He was there to ensure the Jews held their allegiance to Rome, and especially to ensure no rebellion rose up within Judea. Pilate lived in Caesarea, which was like 70 miles away from Jerusalem. But whenever there was any kind of major feast happening or any kind of major celebration happening in Jerusalem, Pilate would make his way to Herod's palace in Jerusalem to stay so he could keep an eye out on the Jews, to make sure there was no rebellion forming, or these people were all kind of keeping the peace. And Pilate was known as an inflexible, stubborn, and cruel leader. The Jews did not like Pilate, and neither did Rome. They had lost patience. Rome had lost patience with Pilate with some of the decisions he had made to just simply provoke the Jews to anger and rebellion. And so at this point, he's on a short leash, and they're going, look, if you do one more thing, you're out. One more thing, Pilate, we're pulling you out. You are no longer going to hold this position. So Pilate knows that he's on thin ice. So now it's Friday morning, and the highest-ranking Jewish leaders, the Sanhedrin, which consisted of 70 Jewish leaders, they have brought Jesus to Pilate. And the reason that they're bringing Jesus to Pilate is because the Sanhedrin, the religious authority, have no grounds, have no authority to put anyone to death. And so but they want him dead. They don't like the idea that he's calling himself the Messiah, yet he's not doing anything about their situation with Rome. He's not at all what they were expecting to be in a Messiah. And so he did not fit the bill. And so they're convinced that Jesus is guilty of blasphemy. The thing is, Pilate could care less. He couldn't care less about if this guy called himself Messiah or not. That is none of his business. That is not what he is there for. Rome did not arrest and certainly didn't execute anyone that wasn't at least perceived as a political threat. I don't care what your religious ideas and what you claim. I don't care about that. But if you're claiming something that is going to affect Rome, then we'll hear you out. And the Sanhedrin knows that, and so they changed the script a bit. And they used political language, and they usher Jesus in to Pilate and say, look, this guy says he's the king. This guy says he's the king of the Jews. He says he's the king. And so Pilate hears them out. And Pilate asked them, are you the king of the Jews? And he answered him, you've said so. And the chief priests accused him of many things. And Pilate again asked him, have you no answer to make? See how many charges they're bringing against you. But Jesus made no further answer, so that Pilate was amazed. And here's the thing: Pilate knows, and we get a more detailed account in some other gospel accounts, like in Matthew and Luke and John. But what we know is that Pilate knows that Jesus is innocent. Nothing they have presented warrants a death sentence by Rome, but the Sanhedrin is relentless, and Pilate knows he's walking on thin ice, and so he goes with another plan. If he can turn the decision over to the crowd, or this is the crowd's decision, this is not his decision, it is them making the decision, certainly they wouldn't be so bent on putting an innocent man to death. He knows what the religious leaders are saying, what they're accusing him of, but certainly the crowd knows this guy is not guilty. He's not worthy of getting a death penalty here. And so this is what he does. Now at the feast, he used to release for them one prisoner from whom they asked. And among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in their insurrection, there was a man called Barabbas. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he usually did for them. Now here's the thing. There were three men that were to be crucified on this day. And one of them was this political activist. He was known as a zealot. He was someone who had apparently killed somebody in an uprising, a rebellion against Rome. John tells us in his account that this man was also a thief, and Matthew tells us that he was a notorious criminal. His name is Barabbas. And says the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he usually did for them, that he would release one prisoner. And he answered them, saying, do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews? For he perceived that it was out of envy that the chief priests had delivered him up. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release for them Barabbas instead. And Pilate again said to them, then what shall I do with the man that you call the king of the Jews? And they cried out again, crucify him. And Pilate said to them, why? What evil has he done? But they shouted all the more, crucify him. So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. This is not exactly the way Pilate saw it going down. This is not what he expected. But for the sake of keeping peace and for keeping his own job, Pilate releases Barabbas and turns Jesus over to be crucified. Everything about this trial was unjust. The timing of the trial, no trials were to happen during Jewish feasts, right in the middle of Passover. The use of witnesses was unjust. Due process was completely ignored. The conviction process was unjust. And Pilate's consent to have Jesus executed just to save his own skin was unjust. This whole trial was a sham. But in this trial, in these 9 verses, these verses here that we have of Jesus standing before Pilate and standing before the crowd, we learn something about the way that people respond to Jesus. We see 4 different characters in these few verses that have 4 different responses to Jesus. And honestly, the responses to Jesus have not changed. This is the way that people still respond to Jesus today. And so we're going to look at these 4 characters. And then somewhere in here, I think we're going to find ourselves in how we respond to Jesus. The first character are the religious leaders. In chapter 14, we saw that when Jesus acknowledged, when they asked him, when they were asking him about his identity, are you the Messiah? And he comes right out and says, yeah, actually I am. He refers to himself as the Son of Man, and he talks about how you will see the Son of Man coming down with power and authority, and they just could not stand it. They lost it. The high priest in that moment, after Jesus made that statement, the high priest, he tore his robe, and they condemned him to death with beating him, spitting on him, mocking him. So what's the deal? Why such hate here? Well, one, Jesus was a threat to their power. Jesus had what they couldn't stand to lose, and that was power. The religious leaders were known to be the most influential, the most revered, and had the most power in society. And power, as you know, is addicting. And those addicted to it will kill to have it, and will kill to keep it. And if that wasn't enough, Jesus was exposing these religious leaders for who they really were. Earlier that night, John records for us what Jesus had said. He said, if I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have been guilty of sin. But now they have no excuse for their sin. He's talking about the religious leaders. They have no excuse for their sin. Whoever hates me hates my Father also. If I had not done among them the works that no one else did, they would not be guilty of sin. But now they have seen and hated both me and my Father. But the word that is written in their law must be fulfilled. They hated me without a cause. Jesus came with a message that pointed to a greater problem than just simply outward behavior, which the religious leaders, they were great at spotting. And they were great at maintaining. Awesome outward behavior. And they could point out everybody else's when they got it wrong. But Jesus comes along and he says, no, it's not about outward behavior. That's not what this boils down to. The religious leaders, they had the outward game down, but Jesus says, no, the problem is not the outward behavior. It's the heart, which cannot be covered or dealt with by outward behavior. Well, the religious leaders, they were so good at this that their religious performance was intimidating to everyone. The way in which they lived, the way in which they performed this religious life, everybody else around them, they're like, we can never measure up to that. And they knew it. The religious leaders knew it. Nobody could be as good as religious leaders. And it gave the religious leaders their high standing in Jewish culture. It gave them power and control. Nobody can measure up to the lifestyle like the religious leaders. So here comes Jesus, and he says, no. The real issue is the matter of the heart. And he has the audacity to call out the sin in the religious leaders. He's like, I know how you're living, and I know how they're living, and you're all the same. It's just they clean it up a lot better. The issue is a matter of the heart. But then Jesus preaches a message of repentance, that God is a God of justice, but grace and forgiveness is available. A new life is possible, not by religious activity and sacrifice by priests, but through faith. Jesus is dismantling the very system that sustained their authority and control, and they hated him for it. Matthew tells us that they wanted to destroy him for it. He said, man, that's crazy. Why would they do that? I mean, I would never do that. Well, let me ask you a question. What if you were faced with the decision of either Jesus having complete control of your life or you having complete control of your life? What if all of a sudden you were faced with a decision that it's either going to be you calling the shots from here on out for your life, or it's Jesus calling the shots for your life from here on out. And you can't mix the two. They cannot coexist. One has to go. In this moment, you got to choose. Is it going to be you calling the shots or Jesus calling the shots for the rest of your life? In every aspect of your life. The way you raise your kids, the way that you spend your money, all of it. One has to go. There's no like, man, I did it today, but I'm going to give it back tomorrow. It's either Jesus or you. What would you do? Well, there's another character in the story, and that's Pilate. Pilate is in a position that he doesn't want to be in. He knows that Jesus is innocent, yet he knows that if he loses the crowd, he could lose his job. He knows the truth about Jesus. But there are other things that just seem to be more important in the moment than Jesus. Maybe you can relate to that. Maybe you say, but it's not that I don't believe. Well, I believe. I believe this, but it's just this time of my life. It's not a good time. Man, I know you're talking about like full-on surrender to Jesus and he's king. I'm not saying that's not true, but to give it all right now, at this time of my life, it's just not good timing. I've got other things going on that seem to be a bit more important right now. I've got a career that I'm trying to get going. I've got some financial stuff that I'm trying to get worked out. I'm trying to enjoy my retirement. Look, man, I'm in high school. Man, I'm just trying to have a good time. I'm just trying to make some friends here. I'll deal with Jesus later. I'll deal with all of that later when I get older, when I'm married, when I have kids, when life slows down, when I have more time, when finances settle down, when I'm settled into a career. Why? Why later? Why not now? Because you know what it would mean to follow Jesus. You know what it would mean for your life to surrender, to love Jesus, to serve Jesus. Is that you? Like, is that you? You're going, man, I'm not saying I don't believe that stuff. I'm just saying, man, I just got some stuff going on right now that I really can't give everything to that. I'm good. I got heaven when I die and all of that. I believe, and so I got some things I got to figure out first. I got some things. Life is crazy right now. You see, we look at what's important, and it seems important until something more important comes along. Isn't that right? It's like when something bad happens to you, and it seems so bad in the moment until something worse happens, and then that thing doesn't seem so bad anymore. It's like when you break a nail, and you think that's bad, but then you stub your toe, and you forget all about the nail. Your team loses a game, but then one of your kids or someone in your family gets sick. Or when you lose a job, and man, that's one thing. But then your marriage starts to fall apart. Or the test results come back positive. Then all of a sudden, losing your job just doesn't seem all that important anymore. See, we need to live our lives with the end in mind. And listen, I promise you, in 100 years, there will be nothing more important than where you stand with Jesus Christ. The only thing that will matter is what you have done now with Jesus Christ. Not what you did when you were 10 years old and you asked Jesus in your heart. The only thing that will matter in 100 years is what you did now with Jesus Christ. And just having a neutral position on Jesus is not an option. I believe in Jesus and that I want to be forgiven and I want to go to heaven, but he's not going to be leading my life. I'm just kind of somewhere in the middle. I said the prayer. Maybe I got baptized, and I'm not denying all that stuff, but I'm not going to follow him. He's not leading my life. I'm just kind of somewhere here in the middle. This is where Pilate tried to be. This is what Pilate tried to put himself in. One of the questions that Pilate asked, he said, what should I do with Jesus? Now, Pilate is asking this question as if to say, hey, look, this is your call. I mean, what do you want me to do with Jesus? What should I do here with Jesus? It's your call. It's not mine. I mean, I believe he's innocent, so I'm just kind of putting this in your hands. This blood's not going to be on my hands. But listen, that is not a question you can just pass off. What shall I do with Jesus is a question that every single person has to answer. That is not a question. You can just say, hey, won't you make that decision? I don't need to make that decision. I'm just kind of in the middle somewhere. You can't do that. Being neutral is not an option. I think that there is this common thought among us and in our culture that says as long as we don't do anything too crazy, as long as we don't do anything too terrible, that we're all kind of in this safe zone, where it's all kind of good. We're all God's children, and that whole deal. And if you follow Jesus, then that just kind of puts you in kind of an extra safe zone. Listen, that's just not true. Jesus said this. He said right after probably the most famous verse in all of the Bible, for God so loved the world. Here's what he says right after that. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Well, why does the world need saved? Well, he goes on. He says, whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only Son of God. I want you to hear what Jesus just said. He just said that our default position is that we don't believe. That we don't just come in here and we don't just come into this world and into life going, we're all kind of good. We all kind of are okay with God. God doesn't have a big deal, like a big problem with me, and I don't have a problem with God. That is, Jesus just completely debunked that. It says, no, your default position is that you don't believe. You don't love God. We love ourselves. And therefore, Jesus just said, we are condemned. That we come into this world, that our default position is, you're condemned. So the question that looms over every one of us is the question that Pilate asked, what am I going to do with Jesus? What should I do with Jesus? Listen, he is either Lord, he is either King, or he is nothing. Whoever believes in him. You say, well, I believe. Then I believe in him. I'm not like not believe. I'm like an atheist or nothing. I believe in him. But you need to understand what Jesus is saying. These two words, when he puts these two words together, believe in, it literally means to put all of your weight on. To stake your life on. To put everything on him. To put all of your weight, all of your hope for this life and the life to come on him. Whoever believes in him, puts everything in on him, is not condemned, but whoever does not believe in other words, I can say some things about belief, but he's not leading my life. Whoever does not believe in him stands condemned already. Well, for Pilate, it was just too much of a risk. You see, when the love of comfort and the love of peace and pleasure and predictability become the standard by which we make every other decision in our life, that's when we know that security has become an idol. I'm sorry, risk is just not in my vocabulary. So I don't need this whole Jesus thing disrupting my life. I don't need to get all crazy with this. And things like telling people about Jesus and risking my name and reputation to love someone for the name of Jesus, man, that's not what I do. Sorry. That's where Pilate was. That's how he saw Jesus. He was just kind of messing up his safe and comfortable life. Pilate's going, I find no reason to bring a charge against him, but I can't let him go. I find every reason to trust him, but I just can't bring myself to do it. Well, there's a third character in the story. It's the crowd. Now, if you're familiar with this story at all, if you're familiar with kind of how this week went down, the week of Passover, which I said that Jesus had entered in on Sunday. And if you remember, all over the world, we celebrate the Sunday before Easter. We call it Palm Sunday. And so, and oftentimes we talk about the crowd that welcomed Jesus in. That as Jesus was coming into Jerusalem, they're waving palm branches. They're hailing him as king, ready to crown him as king. And then you fast forward just a few days, and then you have the crowd standing there in front of Pilate and Jesus, and Pilate is saying, who do you want me to release to you? And they say, well, we want Barabbas. Oh, what should I do with Jesus? I want you to crucify him. And oftentimes on that sermon on that Palm Sunday typically goes something like, well, man, how fickle are we? We go from, oh, I want him king, to, no, crucify him. Well, let me just kind of dispel some of that. That is, it's likely that it's not the same folk. The crowd that welcomed Jesus in was a crowd from Galilee, most likely, from where Jesus was from, that had followed him in. They had seen all that he had done. They had heard him teach and all of these things, and they're saying, hey, we want him to be king. The crowd that is now standing outside the headquarters of the governor is the crowd from Jerusalem. It's not the same crowd. Well, why do they want Jesus out? Well, because Jesus doesn't fit their expectations. They're looking for someone to come rescue them from Rome, someone to lead a charge in freeing them from Roman oppression, someone with military skill, someone with political ambition. You see, they, like so many of us today, think that their biggest problem is a political problem, that it's a problem outside of themselves. It's only if we can get the right person in place, man, then we'll be free. And Jesus, again, he comes preaching a message of repentance, that your biggest problem is not outside of you. Your biggest problem is you. That your freedom isn't being withheld because of Rome or Washington, for that matter. Your freedom is being withheld because you are in bondage to sin. What you need is to be reconciled to God. You need to be free from your sin, rescued from your sin. And as long as you think the problem is out there somewhere, you'll never come to terms with the reality of your life, and you will never, ever know freedom. You'll never know real joy. You'll never know life the way it was meant to be lived. But the crowd is not convinced. I'm sorry, but Jesus, he does not meet our expectations. We thought he'd come in here like on a horse, gather the troops, and we'd head off to Rome, and we would have our way, and we would be a free nation again. And with this Jesus, he didn't even put up a fight. He didn't even defend himself. Look what they're doing to him. He's not even talking. Now, Barabbas, though, maybe we can get behind that guy. So given the choice, the crowd prefers Barabbas over Jesus. Barabbas seems to fit the bill of their kind of rescuer over Jesus. Barabbas, man, he was a political activist. He was a patriot. He was a man of action, even willing to take the life of someone for the cause. And so they say, give us Barabbas. Give us Barabbas. Give us pleasure. Give us satisfaction. Give us political freedom. Give us the American dream. We'll take Barabbas. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been in a place in your life where it just seems like Jesus is not meeting your expectations? Where God just does not seem to be aware. He's not meeting your expectations. Have you ever been disappointed with Jesus? I know it's not like we're in church. I can't say that out loud. I have. Have you ever expected him to act in a certain way only to find that it's not going to go the way that you had hoped? You look at what's going on in your life. You look at what's going on in your financial situation, your marriage, your family, your health, the health of somebody that you love, and you wonder why God doesn't seem to act. Your prayers just seem to go unheard. Here's what we know. And we've been talking about this for quite some time, that God is doing what God is doing for his glory. That God does what God does to make himself known, to glorify himself. So God is doing what God is doing for his glory and for the good of those who love him, those who he has called. In Isaiah 55, God says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." You see, God sees what we don't see. God's going, what if I decide to take the long route? What if in the end it's the same? Like we have the same kind of end, but the means is not the same. What if the way that I see it is the way in which you're going to get there is going to take, it's going to have to go the long way. And here's the thing, I don't like the long way. I shared with my D group not too long ago, we were working through, it was either Philippians or Mark, I don't remember the passage we were working through, and I just remembered as we teach a method in studying the Bible called the HEAR method, and as I was working through it, studying the Bible one morning and working through this, my HEAR journal, I'm at a stage in my life where we have 4 children, and one will be 20, and one is 7, and so like that is like heavy on our minds and our hearts. And in this particular day, I had written down something. I said, I was just talking about my desires and praying to the Lord and saying, Lord, in the end, it is my desire that in the end, my children come to know and to love and follow Jesus Christ. And I can't tell you, as I'm writing that down, the words, in the end, I didn't want to put those down. Like I was choking up, I was fighting. In the end. In the end. Because if God answers that prayer, then who knows what the days in front of us will look like. If God answers that prayer, then who knows what kind of pain and hurt and difficulty they might have to walk through. But God's ways are not our ways. I mean, think about what Jesus said in the beginning of his most famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed or happy are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn. What are you talking about? Blessed are those who, I don't want to mourn. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. I say God sees what we can't see. God's ways are not our ways. And thank God that he did not send Jesus to set his sights on Rome and political freedom for Israel. But instead, he sent Jesus to take the place of Barabbas. So who are you? Like, where are you at now in your life? Are you hiding behind religious activity like the religious leaders? Are you hesitant to surrender your life because of what it might cost you, like Pilate? Or are you like the crowd and you've got an agenda for your life that Jesus just doesn't seem to come through on? Well, there's a fourth character here, and that's Barabbas. We don't know a whole lot about Barabbas. We don't hear anything else about Barabbas. We just know that he was in prison for his role in a rebellion against the government in murder. He was found guilty and was waiting to die a death by crucifixion for his crimes. Imagine being Barabbas. The Pilate decides to let a prisoner go free, and he sends the guards to go get Barabbas. Barabbas doesn't know that. For all he knows, this is it. They come calling for Barabbas, and they just say, Barabbas, you just follow me. And he's thinking, okay, well, this is the day. This is the moment that I'm going to die. He comes out to the platform where Pilate is standing there alongside this other man that he doesn't know, he's never seen. This man's in chains. He is even perhaps even unrecognizable, probably because of the scourging that went through. I could describe for you what goes on with the scourging. It would make you sick. And here's Jesus standing there with Pilate. And what is this man doing here? And there's this crowd that is loud and obviously very angry. And Barabbas is wondering what is happening. The next thing that he knows, he hears Pilate yelling, "Do you want Jesus or Barabbas?" And the crowd is screaming, "Give us Barabbas." And what about Jesus? Crucify him. And Barabbas, in one moment, he's preparing to face death for what he had done. And the next moment, he's standing there, no more chains, no more guilt. He's free. Jesus has taken his place. Barabbas deserved to die, and he didn't. Jesus did not deserve to die, and he does. Barabbas was a rightful prisoner, a criminal, a thug, a murderer. He was a bad man. He deserves the chains. He deserves the punishment. What has Jesus done but restore and heal and deliver and set free and open blind eyes and open deaf ears, heal the lame and the sick? What has Jesus done? And Barabbas walks off the platform a free man, and there goes Jesus to be crucified on the cross that was meant for Barabbas. I am Barabbas. I am Barabbas. I'm the one who's guilty. I am the one with sin. I am the one with the shame. I am the one that deserved to die. And Jesus came to take Barabbas' place, and Jesus came to take my place. He came to take your place. And throughout this trial, we see Jesus being quiet, being silent. He says 4 words, "You've said so." And then they go on, beating him, making a mockery of him, accusing him. He says nothing. But he invades this whole scene. I wonder what he was thinking. He's not saying anything. What's he thinking? All of these things are coming at him, and the crowd is angry, and all of these things transpiring before him. What is he thinking? What is his posture? Here's what we know. Just twice in Mark's gospel, he tells us that when Jesus stood in front of a crowd, that whenever Jesus looked into a crowd, the people who had only come to Jesus to only get their physical needs met, to only get healed, to see some miracle, that when Jesus looked out into the crowd, he didn't get angry, he didn't get impatient. He had compassion. He had compassion. That Jesus said, I see them. They're like sheep without a shepherd. The question that is looming over you right now is Pilate's question. What should I do with Jesus? What should I do with Jesus? You should turn to him today. You shouldn't wait. You shouldn't wait for whenever that thing that you think, if that were to happen, then it'll be time. You shouldn't wait. For your good, for your joy, you should turn to him today. You should call on him. Take me out of the crowd. Take me away from the ego of the religious leaders, from the insecurity of Pilate, and God, make me your own. And he will. He will. He will make you his own. So let me pray for us.